This is a massive weekend for MMA, and of course, topping it off on my channel is going to be OKTAGON 73. I have got breakdowns for the UFC 317 card. I've got breakdowns for the main card of Cage Warriors 191, and I'm going to be breaking down 8 of the 11 fights on this OKTAGON 73 card as well. So please do check out my other videos if you do want to see my predictions for those other cards. This is going to be a pretty fun card. We actually do have a pretty well-known name fighting on the prelims for a title here. Zhalgas Zhumagulov is going to be fighting for the flyweight championship on the prelims of this OKTAGON card. So this fight, I do believe, if I'm not mistaken, is going to be broadcast on YouTube, which should be pretty exciting, I do think. The card is broadcast in general on Saturday starting at 12 PM Eastern Time. The main card is a pay-per-view. Maybe the prelims are also a pay-per-view. I could be incorrect about that, but that is my understanding. It's either going to be free or it's potentially a pay-per-view. The last time I followed OKTAGON very closely, OKTAGON was broadcast on DAZN here in New Zealand. Maybe that deal has changed. I'm not 100% sure, so I do apologize about that. And with that being said, I actually haven't followed OKTAGON closely for a while now, I will admit. I did used to be a massive fan of OKTAGON, I would say probably before I started studying a couple of years ago when I was working full-time and my sleep schedule was just a total mess. And when I started studying, I kind of just had to stop watching OKTAGON because these cards take place at 4 AM for me. So the timing just didn't really work out. But I do have a lot of interest in this card due to the title fight, of course, and just in general, just given the fact that it's a massive weekend for MMA, I feel like I will be doing you guys and myself a disservice by not breaking down this very exciting OKTAGON card. Now, I do know that the main card's on pay-per-view, as I said, but maybe the prelims are on YouTube. Not 100% sure, I will be honest. But this card, though, is going to be on in Hamburg, Germany. It's going to be taking place in an arena of 16,000 capacity, which is why I've really started to take notice of OKTAGON recently, because these guys are putting on huge events in front of huge crowds. Last year, they did the event in Germany that had 55,000 people in attendance. That was absolutely ridiculous, and maybe they're going to try and do something again this year. But with all of that being said, let's just now get into my predictions for this card. I'm not going to break down every fight. I'm going to break down 8 of them, as I did say in the intro. First fight that I want to talk about is Barborík taking on Richie Smullen. And I will be honest, Barborík on paper, I thought that this guy was going to be an absolute world beater. He has a win over this guy, which was 19-3. And on paper, that is absolutely incredible. I saw that win and I thought, wow, that's pretty impressive. And I actually found the fight before I looked at Paulo Surian's Tapology page. So when the short fat guy just walked out into the cage, I thought, I'm not watching the right fight. You know, the commentary wasn't in English. The description wasn't in English. I thought, you know, I'm watching the wrong thing. So I looked into Surian a little bit more. And in all of my years on YouTube, I have broken down MMA on YouTube, not just the UFC, MMA on YouTube for 4 years. I've watched probably thousands of fights at this point. I don't think I've ever seen a guy with a more padded record than Paulo Surian, a 19-4 record now, and this is the level of competition he's fought. I find it hard to believe that a lot of these fights even happened, I will be honest. I think there's actually a good chance that some of them didn't happen, but I'm honestly not really too bothered to look into it personally. The point is, Barborík dominated this short little dude, and actually won the fight with a lot of wrestling, which is interesting because Barborík does typically use quite a bit of striking, given the fact that he's got a 6-foot frame. At 155 pounds, this fight is at 145, though, so it'll be interesting to see how he can maybe look on the scales, potentially. But Barborík does use his range quite well. He can wrestle, but the problem is with Barborík, I have seen him out-wrestled, and I've seen him out-wrestled easily. Before the injury early in the first round, Maxime Radu was absolutely dominating him in the wrestling, and Ivan Buchinger was able to find success in the wrestling himself, and I do believe that Richie Smullen can go out there and find his own success in the wrestling. Smullen actually was on the Ultimate Fighter many years ago, actually all the way back in 2018, when he did lose to Luis Pena, and I kind of have been hoping for his success ever since. He did have a bit of a spell in Bellator, kind of on and off, I guess, and now he's going to be getting another big opportunity for OKTAGON, which I do think is quite exciting. I do think he is going to make the most out of this opportunity as well. I do think out of these two guys, given that it is a grappler versus grappler matchup for the most part, I think Smullen is the better grappler of these two guys. So I am going to be siding with Smullen. The odds are very close, though. Smullen is -125 right now in this fight. I think he does get it done, though. most likely by decision. This fight has been cancelled according to the Tapology forum, so we're going to jump straight into now Zhalgas Zhumagulov title opportunity against Beno Adamia. And Beno Adamia is a lot better than his record suggests. He's got a 12-8 record. You would think that that doesn't really mean all that much, but this guy is on a massive win streak right now, and he started off his career with a lot of losses. In fact, he lost quite a few fights over in China, which does typically not really have the highest sort of level of competition, but it seems like something happened, maybe something clicked, maybe he just locked in, I don't really know, and he's gone on a pretty impressive win streak with a win over an undefeated Muhammad Walid, and he's also gone on to win against Stipe Bircic, who's a former Cage Warriors guy, and then he beat Sam Creasy, who's a former Cage Warriors champion, and in that fight, he just kind of pressured Sam Creasy. You know, I believe by the numbers, he was up in total strikes, but Sam Creasy was up in significant strikes. It was a close fight, but at the end of the day, the guy that was pressuring forward, the guy that was initiating a lot of the clinches was Beno Adamia. And it's quite funny looking at these two guys, because I actually do think that they fight in a very similar way. Both Zhalgas Zhumagulov and Beno Adamia are very pressure forward sort of guys. They don't really shoot takedowns, but they do on occasion. I would say out of the two, the guy that's more likely to actually shoot a takedown is Zhalgas Zhumagulov, but I will talk about our boy in a moment. Beno Adamia, though, I do want to give him his flowers. On the feet, he's pretty solid. He does use a relatively large frame pretty well. And I do think now against Zhalgas Zhumagulov, there is actually a chance, potentially, that he can get something done as a massive underdog here, as he is actually the defending champion. And here's a fun fact for you guys. OKTAGON has never had a flyweight champion that has defended the belt. Zhalgas Zhumagulov is now going to try and take the belt off Beno Adamia after he just won the belt against Creasy. And the way that he's going to want to do that is by doing what Zhalgas Zhumagulov does. Coming forward, throwing a lot of volume, and shooting a takedown on occasion. The thing about Zhalgas Zhumagulov is you could argue he had a pretty bad sort of draw when it came to the decisions in the UFC. A lot of people think that he actually beat Charles Johnson. A lot of people think that he beat Jeff Molina. Even some of these other fights were a little bit closer than I think some people think that they could have been by the judges, if that makes sense. But since kind of leaving the UFC, or getting released by the UFC, I should say, he has looked pretty good fighting for local Kazakh promotion, Niza FC. And Cleveland McLean is a pretty good fighter. You know, Cleveland McLean gave Joshua Van a somewhat good fight on the regional scene before Van did finish him, of course. And speaking of Van, Zhumagulov has a split decision against Josh Van. That has aged incredibly well. I do know that Van has improved a lot, though, since then. I do think, though, in this matchup, we are going to once again see Zhumagulov go out there, uses pressure forward style, uses boxing quite a lot, and I actually am going to pick Zhalgas Zhumagulov to defeat Beno Adamia here. Minus 400 is very wide odds, though, I will admit, because I think that Beno Adamia does have a good chance at maybe pulling off a massive upset here, but I think the pressure is going to go to Zhalgas. The takedowns as well, Zhalgas does attempt takedowns. He doesn't typically get a lot of them, but he does attempt them, and I think the fact that he can get takedowns could also maybe sway the judges a little bit as well. So I'm going to go Zhumagulov to win a decision here in this 5-round prelim matchup. Now we have Wahid Nezhad taking on Faridun Shokhnazarov. Faridun Shokhnazarov, I will admit, was a little bit disappointing to me. He was a guy that looked really big against a lot of his opponents, but I don't actually think that he's a very big guy for 170 pounds. Honestly, he mostly fought guys who were a lot more thin than him. Antonio Marcos da Silva was a very thin guy at 170 pounds, and he did beat him. Spent the most of the first round striking against him, which is very upright, sort of stationary, somewhat slow sort of striking style that he did have. But then he started to wrestle in the second and the third round. And I will admit, honestly, not all that impressed by the wrestling. Personally, I think Wahid Nezhad, actually, out of the two guys, might possess actually the more MMA effective grappling style, I should say. The thing about Nezhad, though, is he is very hittable on the feet. He went to absolute war against Jakub Bachnik here, and this was a fun fight. You know, in the first round, Bachnik, or maybe it was the second round if I can remember correctly, sorry, Bachnik brutally dropped him. Brutally dropped Nezhad, and in the third round, Nezhad pretended that a kick went low, like a kick hit his groin, and then dropped Bachnik as Bachnik kind of took the time off, right? Because he thought that he kicked low, and when Nezhad knocked him down then. The thing is, though, about Nezhad is I'm not 100% fully sold on him, and I do think, given the fact that he's minus 200 on Tapology, I think the odds should be a bit closer then that is, this is a short notice fight, I should say. Shokhnazarov looks like he's taking it on short notice. Minus 155 for Nezhad. That's a bit more better, I think. Personally, though, in all honesty, I wouldn't bet on this fight. I know I just kind of broke down the fight badly to just tell you not to bet on it, but I think Zhumagulov is the better MMA grappler out of the two. I personally just wouldn't bet on this one, though, honestly. Now we have Jonas Mågård fighting against Farbod, Iran, and Nezhad. Maybe a hot take on this one. Maybe a hot take. I thought Jonas Mågård beat Igor Severino. I thought he won the first round. Now, a lot of people think that Igor Severino clearly won round 1 and 3. Severino did win round 3. He won it clearly on the feet. But I think Mågård won the first round and the second round in that matchup. But with that being said, Jonas Mågård on the feet does not possess really anything. But on the grappling, he is an elite grappler, man. I really do rate this guy's wrestling and grappling quite well. Scrambled incredibly well against Felipe Lima, and Felipe Lima now in the UFC, given maybe that he could potentially beat Peyton Talbot, is a very good fighter to have a competitive matchup against. And after that, actually went on a run. He beat Jack Cartwright, who's a very solid guy, solid grappler, and then he also beat Josh Hill, a former Bellator guy, a bit old now, I will admit, but still very good one to have on your record. And he's taking on another former, well, not a former, a current wrestler in Iran Nezhad. Iran Nezhad wants to get the takedowns, and he wants to get the takedowns down to the ground. The thing about Nezhad, though, is I think, honestly, out of these two guys, I think Mågård might be the better striker, and Mågård very typically does not possess a striking advantage in his fights. But I think from what I've seen against Nezhad, I'm just not really that impressed by him. I will admit. I just think that the takedowns that he shoots are kind of not set up well at all. He's shooting these takedowns from the other side of the cage a lot of the times. He's diving for them, and I think that Mågård can go out there and just be the better grappler out of the two. Scramble as well, even if he gets taken down. He scrambles incredibly well. I am a big fan of Mågård, and I do think he does get it done. Hopefully that makes sense. I know that Nezhad and Mågård do sound somewhat similar with my accent. And now, guys, I'm about to hit you with a blast from the past here, because Niklas Stolze, former UFC fighter, is now fighting Jessin Ayari, another former UFC fighter. And here's another wee blast from the past, right? Luigi Vendramini, does anyone remember this guy, right? The guy that got absolutely demolished by Paddy Pimblett in Pimblett's debut. He is still fighting, by the way. And Stevie Ray's actually now gone on to fight for the PFL multiple times. He beat Sergio Pettis, and now he's retired recently. Got a twister in the PFL as well. And Jessin Ayari, if you can believe it, lost a 15-minute striking matchup against Stevie Ray. And Stevie Ray is not a striker at all. And Stevie Ray and Ayari both combined for 0 takedowns in this UFC fight, and he lost it. But since then, Ayari's been very inactive. He got released from the UFC. He's kind of come back now. OKTAGON's picked him up. Had a fun fight against Stahl, which he got a very, very late knockout in the last minute of the fight after arguably losing it. And Stolze, kind of the same sort of story, has been quite inactive. The story of Stolze's UFC run was honestly just non-existent takedown defense. If you look into his run, it was just the fact that he was getting absolutely smoked in the wrestling department. I think that Benoit Saint-Denis took him down 4 times in less than, what, like 6.5 minutes cage control time. Amiv, once he took him down, Stolze couldn't get back up. Stolze's a fun striker, but my goodness, this guy just cannot defend a takedown to save himself. However, I do think out of these two guys, he is going to be the more dynamic striker. Stolze recently got a flying knee KO on OKTAGON, which was a sick highlight for him to have. And I think that just kind of given the athletic difference too, I think that Stolze is the more athletic guy too. I don't believe that there's going to be a takedown in this matchup, but if it's going to be, it's probably going to be Stolze getting the takedown. Ayari just does not seem to be the kind of guy that's going to shoot a takedown at all. And one other thing as well that I do worry about is this opponent here, Stahl. Given the fact that Stahl is a wrestler, it does make sense that he was able to do this. Stahl was able to pressure Ayari for pretty much the entire fight. You know, Ayari started the fight quite well, actually throwing a lot of kicks, very dynamic sort of kicks. But once Stahl actually caught him on the feet, Ayari's pressure or Ayari's confidence really, really decreased. And that's when Stahl was able to start taking him down. I think that Stolze in this fight on the feet should be able to win a decision. I think he should throw more volume. I think that he also should be just a bit more dynamic, really. So I'm going to pick Stolze. Both former UFC fighters, a bit of a blast from the past for you guys, if you guys remember those two guys. And another blast from the past, right? Joilton Lutterbach, former UFC fighter, briefly before he was a little bit naughty when he was meant to fight against Sharaputin Magomedov. Of course, if you guys remember this, he was signed to... No, it was Makhmudmuradov. No, it wasn't. It was Sharaputin Magomedov. When did this fight actually get booked to happen? Here it is. Sorry, guys. Yes, he failed. He was a bit naughty. However, Lutterbach's very good. And here's the thing, his most recent win in the MMA, aside from this one here, is over Andreas Gustafsson, where he out-wrestled Gustafsson. Gustafsson just had an absolutely incredible performance against Chaos Williams, where he just put the pressure on Chaos Williams, taking him down over and over and over again. Lutterbach out-wrestled Gustafsson in this fight. It was kind of an eye-opening sort of fight to re-watch, I'll be honest, just given the fact that now we've seen that how good Gustafsson's takedowns can potentially be. And the thing about Lutterbach is I don't even really consider Lutterbach to be a wrestler. I consider him to be more of a striker. Lutterbach has many kickboxing matchups. You would have seen it as I briefly kind of brushed past his Tapology page. He's had kickboxing fights. He's had hasn't he had like bare knuckle fights as well in kickboxing too? He's kind of just done everything. He's done Muay Thai. And MMA is just kind of like a side hustle for him, which I guess you could say is a little bit concerning, given the fact that he's fighting Kaik Brito. But I think Kaik Brito, there's two things about Brito. The first one is maybe he is really good and he's just on a bad run right now, or maybe he was never really that good and I overrated him. Kaik Brito, if you guys remember, actually was a champion of OKTAGON when he knocked out David Kostner, and then he fought against Aubin Elliott in a fight which I still, to this day, don't really agree with the decision. However, it is for the best because Aubin Elliott, I know he just lost to Ko, but Aubin Elliott has probably done more in the UFC than in hindsight Brito probably would have been able to do, because Brito just got knocked out by Ion Sodhu, who might be the single biggest welterweight I have ever seen in my entire life. Not only was he taller than Brito, he was also so much wider. It was ridiculous. Now, it was a little bit of an odd sort of KO finish where Brito had his back taken on the feet in a clinch position, and then as he escaped, Ion Sodhu just kicked him in the head. Trying to finish, think of an example, maybe Holly Holm versus Ronda Rousey style, if you remember that finish. Kind of like that, Brito got folded. Not really that good to see, but I will be honest, in the meanwhile, he didn't really look that good either. I think that Lutterbach here, as long as he just doesn't get one punch KO'd by Brito, because Brito does have that kind of power, I think that he should kind of just be chilling if he fights smart. If Lutterbach can avoid the big shots on the feet and get the wrestling going, which I know that he's capable of doing, we've seen it before, I think that Lutterbach should be able to get this one done. Now, here's the unfortunate reality. He's not the underdog anymore. Lutterbach is actually minus 150 right now, so it looks like the odds have completely flipped. But I do believe that Lutterbach still can go out there and get it done if he fights a smart fight. If he doesn't strike with Kaik Brito for 15 minutes and he does attempt takedowns, I think that this is Lutterbach's fight to win. I think that it's a good matchup for Lutterbach to beat a former champion in OKTAGON and maybe get a title shot himself. I don't really know what the go is at the 170-pound division right now. And we've got another underdog here. Well, the first underdog, I should say, in Kasim Aras. I am going to be picking Aras. Let's see if those odds have changed. They haven't. Aras is still plus 140 right now. I am picking Kasim Aras to win this fight. Now, let's be honest, guys. This is two unathletic heavyweights. You know, both of these guys didn't really impress me that much in the tape. For Kasim Aras, I've been familiar with Aras. He fought against Mario Pinto for 15 minutes where he just ran away. And then, of course, he fought for Bellator a couple of times where he just lost and was a highlight reel for Ballestini. But the thing about Aras, though, is what he does well, I think, is what Palasz struggles with. Aras, all he wants to do is he wants to just close the distance and he wants to lean against you on the cage with the clinch and maybe get a takedown. The thing about Aras, though, is although he is a wrestler, he doesn't really get takedowns. He just leans up against the cage. He makes the fights very, very boring. And I think that's what he's going to try and do here against Adam Palasz, who I personally wasn't super impressed with, I will be honest. He got knocked down and knocked out by Lazar Torev here, but he also got knocked down and submitted by Stuart Austin, so he's taken a lot of damage in his last two fights. And even in the clinch positions, despite being listed at 6'4", I'm not 100% sure if I think he is that tall. I know Kasim Aras is 5'10", he's short against anyone he fights. But Palasz, do I think that Palasz is 6'4"? I'm not that convinced, I'll be honest. And even then, just kind of from what I saw of him, he is a bit slow, he is a bit athletic. Not really all that sold on Adam Palasz, I will be honest, personally. The thing is, though, about Kasim Aras, I don't think he's that good either. I think, though, just given the stylistic matchup where Palasz seems to really only have striking, I think that Aras can just close the distance without getting knocked out and clinch for 15 minutes, make the fight boring, and get a decision win. So I'm going to go with Kasim Aras here. And now we move up to the main event, Christian Eckerlin, who I do believe was on that massive card, which had 55,000 people in attendance. OKTAGON 62. They announced that 59,000 people in attendance, actually. He was the main event where they fought for this King of the Germany belt. I don't know if they're going to be defending this belt against another German fighter. I'm not too sure. But Christian Eckerlin won that matchup, a 5-round main event against Jungwirth, where he actually mixed in a lot of takedowns in that matchup going into the second half of the fight. A lot of the first part of the fight was striking, but Eckerlin eventually started to get his wrestling going in that matchup. And I think that that's something he's going to need to do against Robert Pukač here, because Pukač is also a wrestler from what I saw. He is also, I need to say this about both the guys actually, sorry. At 170 pounds, these guys are 5'11" beasts. Like, these guys are very, very well built, very wide guys at 170 pounds. A lot of power on the hands, a lot of muscle on these guys, both of them. And yeah, I think that both of these guys are going to possess power to maybe change the fight at some moments here, because this is only a 3-round fight, so these guys are going to come out swinging. But the thing about Eckerlin is I did like watching the wrestling quite a lot, because the thing about Pukač is he struggles a lot with leg kicks. Pukač is like a very odd sort of fighter where he's kind of got his chin up in the air and he's not really throwing all that much volume. And he does actually kind of fight, like, it's funny he's doing the bicep flex, because his stance is literally like this. Like, he's kind of bicep flexing in the stance. He's very, very slow on the feet, and he does want to attempt takedowns as well. The problem, though, with Pukač attempting takedowns is I actually do think that Eckerlin is the better wrestler of the two, although he did actually get out-wrestled quite a lot by Leandro Silva. Leandro Silva really exposed that part of his game, where Silva took him down and controlled him in the first 2 rounds of that fight. But since then, we've seen Eckerlin find success with the wrestling in his most recent matchup, especially, I will say. And Eckerlin seems to be a guy that OKTAGON really pushes as like their star from Germany, because when he lost to Leandro Silva, a lot of the comments were kind of talking in German. I had to Google translate them, talking about how it was like a fraud check or something like that, kind of like how we say it, like when Payton Talbot lost to Barcelos and everyone was saying fraud check. This is what the people were saying about Eckerlin when he lost. So maybe this is a guy that OKTAGON's really been pushing recently, kind of since I stopped watching. But I think stylistically against Pukač, I don't think Eckerlin's going to get knocked out on the feet. Eckerlin's not the best striker. He's not super fast himself. Both guys are pretty slow strikers. But I do think that Eckerlin can possess the better wrestling out of the two. So I think that he's going to kind of just be a bit more well-rounded, have more tools to win. Eckerlin's minus 300. I think he does win this fight. I think he wins it by decision. Let me know what you think of this breakdown. I do understand it's probably not my best breakdown, but it is my 3rd breakdown of the day, so I do apologize for that. But let me know what you think in the comments below, and I'll see you guys in my next video.